what we're trying to do is, in this weekend, is study and talk about the idea of redeeming the world through magic. And how is this to be done? Well, the philosopher's stone is a complex of ideas that no matter how you divide it, no matter how you slice it, it's very difficult to hold the pith essence of this concept. But what it really comes down to is the idea that spirit is somehow resident in matter in a very diffuse form, and that the goal of Hermetic thinking and later alchemy is the concentration and redemption of this spirit, a focusing of it, a bringing of it together. This is an idea that was common in the Hellenistic world, not only to Hermetic thinking, but also to Gnosticism. Gnosticism is the idea that somehow the pure, holy, real light of being was scattered through a universe of darkness and of saturnine power, and that the goal is, by a process which we can call yogic or alchemical or meditative or moral/ethical, the light must be gathered and concentrated in the body and then somehow released and redeemed. And all esoteric traditions, East and West, talk about the creation of this body of light. And we will not in this weekend talk very much about alchemy, non-Western alchemy, Taoist alchemy, and Vedic alchemy. But in those systems too, the notion is about the creation of this vehicle of light. This is one metaphor for the externalization of the soul. The philosopher's stone is another. And I will challenge you to try to imagine what the achievement of the philosopher's stone would be like, because it's in trying to think that way that you begin to dissolve the categories of the Cartesian trap. And so imagine for a moment an object, a material, which can literally do anything. It can move across categorical boundaries with no difficulty whatsoever. So what do I mean? I mean that if you possessed the philosopher's stone and you were hungry, you could eat it. If you needed to go somewhere, you could spread it out and sit on it, and it would take you there. If you needed a piece of information, it would become the equivalent of a computer screen, and it would tell you things. If you needed a companion, it would talk to you. In other words, if you needed to take a shower, you would hold it over your head and water would pour out of it. Now you see, this is an impossibility. That's right. It's a coincidentia oppositorum. It is something which behaves like imagination and matter without ever doing damage to the ontological status of one or the other. Now this sounds like, pure pathology in a context of modern thinking, because we expect things to stay still and be what they are and undergo the growth and degradation that is inimical to them. But no, the redemption of spirit and matter means the exteriorization of the human soul and the interiorization of the human body, so that it is an image freely commanded in the imagination. Imagination. I think this is the first time I've used this word this evening. The imagination is central to the alchemical opus, because it is literally a process which goes on in the realm of the imagination taken to be a physical dimension. And I think that we cannot understand the history that lies ahead of us unless we think in terms of a journey into the imagination. We have exhausted the world of three-dimensional space. We are polluting it. We are overpopulating it. We are using it up. Somehow the redemption of the human enterprise lies in the dimension of the imagination. And to do that, we have to transcend the categories that we inherit from 1,000 years of science and Christianity and rationalism, and we have to re-empower and re-encounter the mind. And we can do this psychedelically, we can do it yogically, or we can do it alchemically and hermetically. Now, there is present in the world at the moment, or at least I like to think so, an impulse which I have named the archaic revival. It's what happens is that whenever a society really gets in trouble, and you can use this in your own life, when you really get in trouble, what you should do is say, what did I believe in the last sane moment that I experienced? And then go back to that moment and act from it, even if you no longer believe it. Now, in the Renaissance, this happened. The scholastic universe dissolved. New classes, new forms of wealth, new systems of navigation, new scientific tools made it impossible to maintain the fiction of the medieval cosmology. And there was a sense that the world was dissolving. Good alchemical word, dissolving. And in that moment, the movers and shakers of that civilization reached backwards in time to the last sane moment they had ever known, and they discovered that it was classical Greece. And they invented classicism in the 15th and 16th century. The texts which had lain in monasteries in Syria and Asia Minor, forgotten and untranslated for centuries, were brought to the Florentine Council by people like Gemistus Pletho and others, and translated, and classicism was born. Its laws, its philosophy, its aesthetics. And we are the inheritors of that tradition. But it is now once again exhausted, and our cultural crisis is much greater. It is global, it is total, it involves every man, woman, and child on this planet. Every bug, bird, and tree is caught up in the cultural crisis that we have engendered. Our ideas are exhausted, the ideas that we inherit out of Christianity and its half-brother science, or its bastard child science. So what I'm suggesting is that an archaic revival needs to take place, and it seems to be well in hand in the form of the revival of goddess worship and shamanism and partnership. But notice that these things are old, 10,000 years or more old. But there was an unbroken thread that, however thinly drawn, persists right up to the present. So the idea of this weekend is to show the way back to the high magic of the late Paleolithic, to show that there were intellectual traditions, there were minority points of view that kept the faith, that never allowed it to die. And to my mind, this alchemical, hermetic, Gnostic, Egyptian, Chaldean thread is the thread. And if we unravel it with sufficient care and attention, then we can build a bridge from the otherwise nearly incomprehensible high magic of the late Paleolithic, we can get it as near to ourselves as John Dee, who died in 1604. We can discover that it's no further away from us than the beginning of the 30 Years' War. And, for my money, after that, it gets pretty mucked up. I mean, after Eliphas Levi, who's already waffling, I'm not very interested in the occultism of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. But it's not necessary, because scholarship gives us the Chaldean oracles, the Trismegistic hymns, the library at Nag Hammadi, and so forth and so on. So my impulse is to, in the most austere sense, repopularize, reintroduce this kind of thinking so that people can live it out. And then, step by step, we can evolve our language and evolve our understanding to make our way back to the garden, back to Eden. It's occurred to me recently, it's said that Christ opened the doors to paradise. Yes, but he closed the doors to Eden. And paradise is a very airy place where everybody sits around on clouds strumming their lyres. I think what we want to do is make our way back to the alchemical garden. That's where our roots are. That's where meaning is. Meaning lies in the confrontation of contradiction, the coincidentia oppositorum. That's what we really feel, not these rational schemas that are constantly beating us over the head with the thou shalts and thou shoulds, but rather a recovery of the real ambiguity of being, an ability to see ourselves as at once powerful and weak, noble and ignoble, future-oriented, past-facing. We each need to become Janus-faced and to incorporate into ourselves the banished contradictions of being that so haunt the enterprise of science. We can leave that behind, and when we do, we reclaim authentic being. And authentic being, make no mistake about it, is what alchemical gold really is. That's what they're talking about. Authentic being.